We can't ignore there has been an impact from the tariffs that were announced. They are actively going against US travel. 45% of bookings were made to arrive within 14 days. For the whole of 2024, that was 30%.
Donald Trump's tariffs are having a negative effect on the US vacation rentals market. Canadians are turning away from major hotspots like Florida and California and instead heading to the UK and France. In today's Host Planet podcast, Sally Henry from Key Data outlines the main trends from 2025, including which regions of the UK are performing best. Sally also shares her favourite data stats from the year so far. If you want to know what's happening in our industry right now, this is an episode not to be missed. Sally, thank you for joining us on the Host Planet podcast. Looking at the data, what effect are Donald Trump and tariffs having on the US vacation rentals market in 2025?
Hi, James. Thank you so much for having me. We can't ignore there has been an impact from the tariffs that were announced. We were tracking, obviously, the Dow, and we lost 4,000 points in a day. And then we saw those couple of days trading afterwards, reservations per property fell by 20% across our US clients. So a significant impact on the market and that certainty of consumer confidence following those tariff announcements.
To what extent are Canadian travellers turning their back on the US? And if they are turning their back on the US, where are they heading?
Yeah, so I think the short answer is yes. They are turning their back on the US, and we saw those tariffs to Canada announced first. So looking at bookings made up until about the 7th of April, we can see that Canadians travelling to the US were down 31%. If we look at Canadians travelling to Canada, that was up 5%. So it's not like there's a huge market slump for the Canadians travelling per se. And we've seen that they're coming across to Europe, they're coming to the UK. Some Canadians like Montreal, they're coming across to France. So they are still travelling. They are actively going against US travel. So again, an impact. And there are some regions that have a higher density of Canadian travels, like Hawaii, that, they're suffering more as a destination within the US. So it is affecting some areas more than others.
Yeah, which are the key destinations in the US that are suffering the most? And for your property managers in the US, what's the advice to them about how they can weather this storm?
I mean, probably to answer that in two ways. So the key destinations that Canadian travellers visit in the US, you're looking at Florida, Hawaii, California, South Carolina and Colorado. So they're your top five. How to measure or how to counter it? I mean, we are advising, because the markets are almost as announcements coming daily, I think it's about being really on top of your data and being able to respond to it. And a lot of it is down to consumer confidence, where people are just unsure about how much disposable income they'll have, or, what is safe to travel. So be prepared with those last minute getaways where people will still travel if they have the ability, and the consumer confidence will return. But possibly those longer international trips are potentially the ones that are suffering a little at the moment, as people are just a little uncertain as to what's coming through.
Are you finding that property managers in the US are focusing more on in-country guests right now?
We're definitely seeing that the drive-to destinations are faring better. And that's always the play, that, there is domestic market as well. There are some destinations that rely heavier on that international inbound, almost a repivot to say, okay, well, we still have the properties, and people are still going to be booking them, and people will hopefully come from, that drive-to markets again. So it's just about being able to respond to those market conditions. There are some things, we always say this, are outside of your control, but it's how you respond to them that is ultimately the most important factor. And we, again, we're running a lot of webinars and help and blogs to help our clients understand how to respond to some of these shifts that we're seeing, that, again, totally out of your control, but these macroeconomic factors that we are all being dealt with at the same time with the same amount of notice.
On the flip side, I guess there are hosts and property managers in the UK and France who should maybe be putting a little bit more effort into getting those Canadian travellers.
Absolutely, potentially, people are looking to still travel, and the UK is definitely one of those markets that would benefit from that. I think you need to couple it again with just thinking about the strength of the pound, the euro, the dollar. It's all these changing factors which are playing into a very volatile market right now.
Let's switch tack a little bit then and look at the OTAs. We've seen a lot of data over the last few years about the growth of Booking.com. It's certainly kind of catching up with Airbnb in the UK. Where is Booking.com tracking now, and how's it doing, especially in the UK, in Europe, and in the US?
Yeah, okay. So we're looking here at some Q1, sort of Europe as a whole. We've seen Airbnb flatten. Really, it's for Q1 arrivals, and we've seen strong growth from Booking.com at the expense actually of direct. So we're definitely seeing a swing there. Say for Q2 arrivals, looking at Q2 pacing, we're seeing both Airbnb and Booking gaining some traction, again at the expense of direct. They're both sitting pretty flat. So yeah, we're seeing some real strong performance from the channels when we're looking in Europe. If we look at US, where we finished up, we saw some growth from Airbnb at the end of Q1, and we've seen Booking.com continue to growth, again at the expense of direct and Vrbo in the US. And looking at pacing for Q2, again, small growth from Airbnb, continued growth from Booking, direct and Vrbo again are seeing a decline. So Airbnb and Booking definitely gaining traction in Europe and the US in Q1 and Q2.
And is that the advice now to a lot of US managers, especially, that if they're not on Booking.com, they need to be taking a look at it?
Yeah, I mean, I would always advise everyone to have a breadth of distribution, especially in times of uncertainty. You need in your armour some different channels that are going to work for you, that you can ignite, if you like. So do you have distressed inventory? Is it a later market? Who will be using Booking versus Airbnb? Quite different booking guests. So effectively, I would be spreading my marketing bandwidth as widely as possible in the current climate, so that you can take advantage of these different channels, these different types of guests, and what they offer. And, some consumers are very much, they'll use one app to do all their travel. I use Booking.com to do all of my hotel travel because I'm time poor and I want everything in one place, so I can open one app and it tells me. Same with Airbnb, people will use the app and they don't necessarily go on Google or do the searches. So I would be trying to put myself wherever the consumers were with wallet in a market like this. And also they can help with some internationalization as well. If you look at Booking, they can connect the flight element too. They can deal in the currency that you need them to. They can help with the language. So they can help internationalize your product a lot easier than potentially you could do yourself.
HostHub is a top-rated property management platform for short-term rentals. HostHub can help you increase revenue, improve operations, and ultimately save you time and money. HostHub has everything you need to manage your properties effortlessly and reliably. It will sync rates and availability across all the channels where your properties are listed, and it includes tools like automated messaging, team management, and expenses. It also includes smart pricing integration, task and cleaning management, and automated door locks. HostHub provides a zero double booking guarantee, 24/7 support with an average response time below 3 minutes, and a fresh and friendly interface that is easy to learn and use. And right now, HostHub is offering a 14-day free trial to any host or property manager who would like to try the platform. Head to hosthub.com/HCH for further details. Yeah, the user experience is pretty strong, and yeah, having everything in one place is pretty convenient. You mentioned there that some of the OTAs were growing at the expense of direct bookings. What's the explanation for direct bookings dipping somewhat?
Wow. I think if you look at and you follow what the OTAs are doing, some of their advancements in using AI and putting the relevant product in front of people, working constantly on the seamless checkout, understanding they have a lot more data to be able to tweak. So I think part of it is they're just huge platforms that have learned, that have got a lot of transactions. So potentially they're offering a better booking service maybe. We do have some clients that are 100% direct. Some people offer, a fabulous experience booking, but equally investing in your own website and trying to get that share of search can be difficult and can command quite some skill set and some budget. So it's really, I think people can switch to the OTAs to access that search demand quite quickly. And it depends on your strategy. Some people can manage perfectly well without the OTAs. Some people rely heavily on the OTAs because they want to be more focused on, service in the property when they're there, or on the cleaning element or the operational side. So everyone's got their own USP that they need to focus on, but you can't deny that the OTAs can plug into demand for you very quickly.
100%, yeah, and direct bookings. It's a lot of time and effort and money, like you say there. You want to build a great website. People have got to be able to trust that brand, and the SEO side of things. Organic is very difficult these days. You've got to really spend money if you want to get that traffic, right?
100%, and you've got to really invest in your SEO strategy. It doesn't happen overnight, unfortunately. And a lot of people will say, well, we have a direct booking, and they mean they've got it from a keyword search on Google. And again, that's not free. So it's weighing up those different channels that you can ignite or not. Everyone would love a repeat booker that comes back year after year. So I think when you're looking at a property manager, that's in their remit to give the guests such a great experience and to communicate them once they have them. That repeat guest is gold. But the rest is almost a fight for voice. How do you get in front of, the customer with the best proposition, the best quality product that you can?
Yeah, the easiest direct booking you can secure is a past guest who's enjoyed it. Just let them know that you've got a direct booking site. Just communicate it effectively. All right then, Sally. So we're speaking in April. How would you assess 2025 so far? What are we seeing in the data?
Yeah, probably a word that we use quite consistently is pretty flat right now. So we've had a mix around because of the way Easter fell between March and April. But if you're looking at how sort of Q1's played out, Jan, Feb, pretty flat in guest paid occupancy, slightly higher in ADRs, but not enough to push. So again, we've ended up with this flat RevPAR when we combine the two. So March down a little because Easter was in March. It was 3 weeks earlier last year. So not only does it not fall into March, it doesn't fall into Q1 either, which has been a bit of a nightmare for people's budgeting. But effectively, we've seen a pretty flat market. Obviously, there's differences in different regions, but we're seeing guest paid occupancy flat, which means our ADRs are pacing very similarly to last summer. We talked a lot last year about were the sort of rates too high in the summer, and effectively RevPAR was pushed up slightly. So those higher rates sort of offset that lower occupancy that we saw in the summer. So a similar story to last year, pretty flat, with a switch around for Easter, sort of March and April. So it's not doom and gloom at all, but it's a volatile market. There is huge opportunity. I would say last summer, we had so many disruptions. We had the Euros, which are, hugely disruptive. We had the Olympics. We had a general election. We had appalling weather. So we weren't blessed with everything in our armour last year for UK short-term rentals. But, we can only deal with what we can deal with in front. So we're pacing in a similar way at the moment. But we are also seeing this later booking surge coming, that last minute booking. So being aware, being alert, having your prices right, communicating with your owners that the market is pushing later, that, it's all really important to be on top of your data. I know I work for key data, but it really is more important than ever to be aware of what's going on and being able to respond to those consumer confidence, shifts, which are real.
Are house and property managers being a little bit more realistic with the rates that they think they can achieve this year?
I mean, we're seeing them pacing the same, James, to be fair. But if we got it last year, I think it's about deciding, are you happy to sacrifice occupancy to maintain your rate? I mean, the sweet spot is getting them both. Should you reduce your prices a little so they don't come crashing down as far as we see that, when they do get contracted with the very late markets. But it's about those conversations with your homeowners. It's about understanding the operational costs. So some can't afford to reduce their ADR, and as long as it's a concerted strategy, I think it's fine. We're never there to say reduce your prices or hire them. The ultimate gain is to get as much RevPAR as you can. But you also need to understand those operational costs as well, and what your owners are expecting of you. So it's all about communication and having a conversation, understanding what the market's doing. And if you're not prepared to drop your rates because that's what the market's commanding, that's fine, as long as it's a conversation that you've had and you've made a decision, rather than looking back at the end of the season going, oh gosh, I wish we'd changed our price or lowered our prices. If it's part of your strategy, then that's fine.
I've heard a lot of people as well anecdotally talk about these shortening booking windows. I myself have experienced a lot of last minute bookings. I think over the last year or so, it seems to be like 75-80% of bookings are last minute. Is that what you're seeing in the data as well? And how can property managers deal with that?
Yeah, it's probably two strong. So if we look at Q1 arrivals, this was like up to the last week in March, 45% of bookings were made to arrive within 14 days. So you're right, seeing that very late arrival coming through. If we look, we can see what that was for the whole of 2024. That was 30%. So we're seeing almost a V. So we're seeing people book very early and very late, and it's how you manage. But it depends on your property portfolio. So if you've got a property that's potentially larger with an amazing sea view or some amenities are rarer, they will be booking earlier than properties that are a little bit more mainstream, where there's more choice, because people can look, and if they kind of think, well, I need a 2-bed in this area, I can see there's loads, I'm not going to panic, versus I need a 4-bed with a CV, then they're going to have to secure that earlier. So I think it depends on what your property is, where you're based, what the supply is around you, and you'll get to understand, because if you're seeing an average booking window coming through and you go, oh, well, mine booking longer than that. If you've got a sort of property that should be booking like twice as long as that, then it's all about relativity. So I think understand the market is pushing late, but if you've got a portfolio that commands those earlier booking windows, then you should be making action sooner. And it's all about understanding the supply around you, understand your positioning in the market.
Rather than dropping your rates, is there an argument for kind of holding your nerve a little bit with your rates if you are getting a lot of last minute bookings?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's understanding your environment. So if you can see that everyone else is fully booked, and you take that gamble to say, well, okay, there's not much left, I can hold my rates and I think we're good. If everyone else is dropping their rates, I think it's about being aware. So I often explain and say, look, go and mystery shop yourself as if you're a guest searching, and look on the main platforms, look on your, how are you faring? How are you faring in the algorithm? Sometimes it's about placing yourself, making sure your reviews are shouting out that your amenities are there. So it's not always just on price, and don't always go for the lowest, but equally be really aware of what everyone else is doing, because the other thing, owners talk to each other. So they'll go, owner A said this and owner B's done that. So if you can go back with a very clear data view of what's going on to say, well, we see that, but we can see it's coming in, and 10% of bookings are coming in for 3 days later, and we've seen the weather forecast. There's a whole bunch of factors that I think you need to build in, but have that data to communicate with your owners. So holding, it can work, but equally checking the weather, a few things like that. Have you got any activities around? What are even hotels doing? Just be aware of that decision.
So the word is flat to describe 2025 so far, but are there any regions in the UK or any other countries around the world which are really booking the trend so far this year?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at paid occupancy in the UK, we can see the Cotswolds are pacing positively. They're up, let's say, I'll tell you exactly, 7% pacing. So versus a very flat or slightly down sort of UK average. Northern Ireland is pacing positively. The Highlands in Scotland are pacing positively as well. London's +4. So we have some areas that are pacing positively in guest paid occupancy. And then if you look almost the flip side, Highlands are down in the ADR, so they've obviously compensated occupancy for the ADR, but everywhere else we're seeing positive ADR pacing growth. So again, some Snowdonia 25% up, they're pacing 25% up for ADR for 2025. Northern Ireland is pacing up, Dumfries and Galloway pacing up. So all double digit growth. So there are different pockets, and within those pockets of geography, you're going to have pockets of property portfolio types that are going to be performing differently as well. When we talk at the averages, we are literally talking averages. So some will be outperforming the market and some will be seeing a much softer market. What we try and do is give you a feel for what we're seeing so that you kind of get this sense check of like, oh, okay, the market's not fully booked. Why wasn't I fully booked for Easter? It's like, okay, no, the market is quite late. It's pretty flat. So your challenge as a property manager is how do you get views to your properties? How do you get them booked? And how do you get those repeat guests coming back for you?
And which areas are really struggling this year?
It depends on what if we look, I guess, at the metric of RevPAR, which is that balance between the rates and the occupancy. We're seeing negative pacing in Northumberland, seeing negative pacing in Cornwall, in Devon. Edinburgh is really sort of negative. Obviously, they're countering all their different legislation. So that balance of rates is so important, and it can change so quickly as well. So, you can really push occupancy up by a couple of percent and push your ADR up, and suddenly you can get to, positive RevPAR as well. So there's some areas, but then like Dumfries and Galloway, Northern Ireland, Cotswolds, London, all pacing positively on RevPAR. So again, different pockets performing differently across the UK.
Have you got a large holiday property and want more direct bookings? GroupAccommodation.com connects you with guests who are searching for big cottages, country manors, and even castles. For a low annual fee, you'll enjoy commission-free bookings, direct contact with guests, a custom listing page, and access to powerful owner tools, all while keeping 100% of your profits. Join thousands of hosts making the most of their large holiday rentals. Head to groupaccommodation.com today and start welcoming more direct bookings. So your top tips to hosts and property managers in 2025 in terms of data?
Billa, literally understand your own data, understand what the market's doing, and listen. Obviously, this macroeconomic impact, the news, I'd be dialed into the news every day because the impact on consumer confidence is very real. So, there is talk of, will we end up in recession? It's a big word, but what that means is people's confidence on spend can be damaging to the economy for all aspects. What we find is travel tends to be one of the last things to get put on hold. But people may be deciding they may be downgrading a little, they may be staying a little shorter. We're seeing, the average length of stay shorten across the board by about 0.2 days. People may be downgrading the number of bedrooms, whereas the kids both had a bedroom each, they may be sharing. So I think just being mindful of that value that people will be looking for and that consumer confidence. And some of that literally comes from switching on the news and listening to what's happened to the stock exchange, what's that consumer confidence, what's happening there. So I think it's being aware, use your data, understand your own data, communicate with your homeowners, and just be super aware of that wider macroeconomic environment that we're in. Self-catering does tend to fare well when we are seeing a weaker economy. People are still happy to travel. They may want to be able to control their spend and maybe eat in a few times. So, as a sector, we're fairly well placed. But it's changing every day in terms of that consumer confidence feel, in watching what happens with the interest rates, exchange rates, etc.
And just tell us how key data can help people and where people can find out more information.
So we can help by giving you access to a dashboard that explains all your own metrics and equally pulls in that market data so you can see how you're performing compared to the rest of the market, which in the current climate is even more reassuring to see what else is going on. So reach out to me on LinkedIn, Sally Henry, or keydatadashboard.com. Reach out to any of the team. We'll be delighted to help you.
Fantastic. And we'll put those links in the show notes so people can get in touch. All right then, Sally, we've got a few questions to finish. We've asked these to you before, but we'll update them for 2025. So favourite brand in 2025 in the STR space, apart from Key Data, of course.
Obviously, Key Data first and foremost. Do you know what? I'm going to send it to my friends at yhangry. We did a joint venture down in Cornwall, and yhangry are the a sort of private chef platform who are really taking the short-term rental industry by storm. Their energy, their bounce, their enthusiasm, they're offering something different. I think they're a great team, and I'm excited to see where they go this year. So a great addition into the short-term rental family.
Yeah, great shout out there for yhangry, one of our strategic partners. We've done lots of dinners with them. Check them out. Private chef booking platform can help you earn some extra upselling revenue. Okay, then, Sally, an individual shout out for 2025, somebody from the STR space.
It's going to go to my good friend Robin Clifford from Guesty. I've known Robin. We worked together when he was at Airbnb. We used to talk about the market all the time. Now I'm at Key Data. He's at Guesty. We still talk about the market all the time. So I love his wisdom and his observations on the industry. So a huge shout out to Robin. He's a star.
Brilliant shout out. He really is. He was at our event recently and I interviewed him about the future of travel and how it's going to affect the short-term rentals world. And it was absolutely fascinating. His thoughts on where things are going are really, really interesting. And we're going to record a podcast with him soon because we have to turn that interview into a podcast episode. I'm sure a lot of people will tune in for that. Finally, then, your favorite data stat from 2025 so far?
You just asked me that. I live in data stats, James. This is a really hard one to nail it down. One thing I saw when I did I presented the keynote at the Short Stay Summit, and one thing that really made me open my eyes, think, okay, let's bring this out again. And for the people that didn't see it, we were looking at the average daily rates when you are booking at sort of different times. So we were just talking about that later market. So for Q1, 45% of reservations were made to leave within 14 days. So that's a huge one. But the ADR for those shorter, like later bookings is £96 in Q1. If we look at the other side for bookings made 6 months out, the ADR is 187. Only 5% of reservations, but 11% of revenue. So again, it's this correlation. So your ADR is going to get squeezed the closer to arrival. So if we're seeing a later booking pattern, like a later market, please understand the impact it could potentially have on your revenue because that ADR gets squeezed. And it really hit me. It was so stark. It's like, wow, okay, this is something that property managers need to factor in. We can't always force the market to book earlier, but understand the impact on your revenue because of that later booking market. So a bit of a geeky one, I'm afraid there, James. I wish I could pull out a really fun stat, but hopefully that's useful to some property managers listening, just to understand that impact on their ADR and their revenue.
Very useful indeed. And we'd all love to see our calendars completely packed 6 months out, but that's not real life, is it? That's not reality. So we have to be aware that some people like a last minute trip. Thank you, Sally, so much for your time and for joining us on the Host Planet podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me as ever. Thanks, James.
Great to chat to Sally Henry there from Key Data about Trump, tariffs and key stats that every host and property manager needs to know. If you're looking for more free education, head to hostplanet.club, the fastest growing multimedia platform in the short-term rentals industry. We're proud to help hosts and property managers supercharge their businesses by sharing a wealth of free content. Head online to sign up for our newsletter, download our suite of ebooks, and listen to our podcast series. Until next time, happy hosting.